Welcome to the On Assignment podcast. I'm John Harvey here with my co-host Will Drlik. Will, how you doing?
Good, John. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It's been a great week. We actually have gotten some sunshine up here in the Pacific Northwest. It's always good for the soul. Get a little
beautiful. Get that D3.
Yes, I know it.
We've been missing it up here.
Does most of the country have to supplement D3 vitamins in their nutrition plan?
You know, we need to.
Yeah, it's definitely a must up here. As beautiful as the Northwest is, I'd never want to live anywhere else, but it is definitely a...
Our winters are cloudy.
Yep.
Can be depressing.
If you let it.
Yeah. Mindset, right?
For me,
That's
it's
what we're
no
gonna talk
factor.
about today. It's a mindset. It's a mindset shift.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I love it. But, we're doing great, having a great week and excited about today's topic of discussion. And I want to give you a quote for us to lead off on. And it's by a guy named Dallas Willard. And he said that the most important thing in life is not what you do, but who you become. And he's highlighting the fact that ultimately life is not wrapped up in what we do and what we accomplish, but it's wrapped up in who we are and who we're becoming. A lot of the things that we do in this life won't actually go beyond this life into eternity. And so he's kind of pointing us in the direction of focusing on the thing that's most important, and that's who we are becoming. And that's what we want to talk about today. As men of influence, as men who live our lives on assignment, we can never stay static in who we are, because there's always growth that needs to happen for us to become the men that we want to become, the leaders, the husbands, the fathers, the business people. All those different aspects of life require us to become. Yeah. They require growth. And it's really challenging, because when you're starting out, it's almost like you're just trying to keep your nose above water, just trying to keep up with everything that's going on in life, whether it's marriage, having kids, starting a business, starting a new career, taking on new responsibilities. You're really just kind of caught up in the doing, that it's easy to lose sight of growth and becoming. And that's what we want to talk about today, because a lot of guys actually look at the challenge of growth and the challenge of becoming, and they decide, yeah, I really don't want to take that on right now. I really don't want to be a man who takes on the burden and the responsibility that's required to grow. And I feel like it's important that we address that, because as we want to raise up men who are kingdom assets, that means that we're strong, capable men of faith. And that means that we have to have this thing called a growth mindset.
Yeah. And when did you start shifting your mindset from being goal-driven, checking the boxes, checking off accomplishments, being accomplishment-driven, versus having this growth mindset, focusing on who you're becoming? When did that mindset shift for you?
It's a great question. And I feel like that there's always a point in time where we have to, when we're confronted with the need for us to change the way we think. Mm-hmm. That's part of development. It's part of moving forward in life. And so to answer your question of when did I actually first understand the need to develop a growth mindset, I think, first of all, it happened in my early year, my first year or so of marriage, when I realized that I had stepped into something that I had basically always led through relationships instinctively, and not necessarily well, but just kind of approached it like, yeah, I'll just do what I do and be who I am in the moment, to realizing that I was kind of underwater when it came to being a husband, and that my wife was much more complex, and relationships were so much more difficult when you go from the relationship of a friendship or a boyfriend girlfriend type thing to a fiance to a wife, that I was like, oh, I'm kind of in over my head here. And at that point in time, I didn't even really make make the transition myself, but it was something to where we were part of a church that offered this course called a young marrieds course. And looking back on it, that was a pivotal point for me of realizing that I didn't know what I didn't know, and I didn't know how to grow from there, because my inadequacies were consistently seen in the way I handled myself as a new husband. Yeah, right? Like the ability to handle my wife's her emotions, the way to handle her, the way she communicated, the fact that I thought I knew her pretty good from our dating time, but realizing that, man, I don't really know her very well at all, and I don't know how to know her very well.
Yeah.
And so this course was really cool because they began to talk about things that I'd never thought about. They began to talk about elements of communication that I'd never seen necessarily modeled, and that I'd never even realized was a way of doing things. They started talking about things called love language.
Yeah.
Love languages.
I've
I was
heard
like,
quite a bit about that.
yeah. Now it's kind of a commonplace theme, but
Yeah.
I had never heard about, like, oh, people are wired a certain way, and you can discover how they're wired, and therefore you get to know them deeper so that you can communicate well with them.
Yeah.
So it was pretty eye-opening to me, and I feel like that was at the point where I realized, okay, I'm just doing the work of a husband and kind of, going through the motions instinctively. But if I'm going to truly get through this and become a good husband, I have to grow.
Yeah.
And I have to apply myself. And that course really set the stage for me to grow tremendously in a lot of areas that wouldn't have happened ever if I had just handled it instinctively or the way that I had seen it done in the past. And for me, that was like one of those eye-opening moments where, okay, I'm going to have to really work at this and develop this and grow as a husband in order to be successful as a husband.
Good. This might be off topic, but talking about love languages, what was the difference between your and your wife's love language? Was it the same? Were you guys have the same ones, different ones?
No, we're different in that.
I think it's rare to have the same one.
Yeah.
I think that would be
A lot of
that
times
would be too easy.
Well, or it could get really hard too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it would be easy in certain respects. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, we tend to gravitate towards people who are different from us. And so, my wife's love languages are like words of affirmation. She, I can speak so much life into her through the words I say, or maybe not speak life into her by the words I don't say, and so learning about that's a communication piece where it's like, oh, I actually have to begin to grow in how I communicate and what words I say. I love gifts. There's one of them is about gifts giving and that type of thing. I'm a gifts guy. My wife's a time spent person, so getting time in, words of affirmation, and so we were different. And but there was light bulbs that came on in those moments of understanding where it really helped me understand how to live as a husband.
Yeah.
And how to do some fundamental things that I look to even today that I learned in that class.
That's awesome.
And it's like one of the things I learned in that class that I'll never forget is that you actually shape your wife's thinking about herself by the words you speak about her and the way you treat her. And so if you think that your wife isn't beautiful, your wife is not going to think that she's beautiful, nor is she going to act beautiful. And it's going to become the cycle where she's hurt, you're unsatisfied, and it's just a cycle that leads to tremendous wrong feelings, and then you're never satisfied. And the thought that I learned is that you speak beauty into your wife.
Yeah.
You speak strength into your wife. You speak life into your wife, and she begins to be shaped by your words and your thoughts about her in a way to where you actually have leadership in how you shape that relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. The Bible says your tongue's a rudder
Yeah.
for relationships, your marriage.
Yep.
And yeah, we've talked a lot about intentionality, but it's just being intentional with your wife, your words,
Yeah.
understanding the power of the tongue
Right.
with them, because
Mhm.
you're guiding them, you're leading them,
Mhm.
and you don't like the way that your marriage is going. Do some reflection on what you're saying, what you're speaking.
Yeah.
And not even just to them, but like about them to your friends too. Like, how are you
Yeah.
talking about your marriage at work to your coworkers when they ask you how you're doing, how's your wife doing, or are you complaining? Or it's just like
Right.
the power of the tongue's huge. Not just to them directly, but also just talking about them. How do you represent your marriage?
That's right. It's interesting because that specific topic has a lot to do with the growth mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you just want to settle for a wife who doesn't feel beautiful because you've not spoken beauty into her, if you want to settle for that and be frustrated because she's not changing, but yet you're not growing into a leader who can help that process and speak life into her, then you are in a place where you are in a fixed mindset. It's
Mm-hmm.
where there's nothing I can do about it. I don't need to grow. She needs to grow. And therefore, we're just going to leave it like it is and settle for this state that we're in right now.
Yeah.
That's called a fixed mindset.
Yeah.
But the growth mindset says, you know what? No, I'm not satisfied with this level of relationship. And I know that there's room for us to grow. And so I'm going to learn about this process, which I had to do at the time. And now it's a pretty much automatic way that I lead and
You can feel when things get off track a little bit.
Yeah.
When I need to step up.
It's more automatic. I had to really work at it back then, but now I've been doing it for so long, it's more automatic. But that's the growth mindset. I had to actually say, I need to grow in this area. In order for me to grow, that means I need to learn. I need to apply myself. I need to be teachable, to be humble.
Yeah.
And I need to also be forward thinking. I need to look beyond the moment and say, how can I grow myself? Not pass blame on my spouse, but grow myself in a way to where her life can be transformed and she can become the woman and grow into the woman that God made her to be, because I'm looking beyond the moment. I'm leading beyond the moment, and I'm actually looking for growth in my life.
Yeah. And this all started from you taking a class. So we're going to talk about some points. One of those points is being teachable, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So you humbled yourself to even just go to the class. Sometimes that's hard for men to even just get into the room to want to invest in their marriage or want to change. So being teachable and approaching it from humility and not taking your pride, not thinking that you have it all together, all figured out, and having that mindset of being teachable. That's kind of where it started. And then it grows from there, right?
That's right.
And this right now we're just talking about marriage, but you can apply this to all aspects of your life.
Absolutely. A career, you have to be teachable in a career when you step into new roles, right? You can't go into a new team or into a new company and assume you've got it all figured out and kind of not be teachable. There's got to be a level. I want to grow with the team, and so we're teachable. So yes, it's definitely applicable in every facet of our lives, as fathers, as husbands, and so. But that's right. You have to be willing to actually invest time and energy into learning, and to be teachable, and to assume that you have not become fully saturated with everything you need to know. And and this actually, they talk about how it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks, and that's part of the challenge. As you get older, you can begin to feel like you've got things figured out, and you can lose that teachable spirit, or that heart that wants to learn, and you get kind of stuck in your ways. And so whether we're talking to a young guy just starting out or an older guy who's kind of in his 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, we should at every point in our lives have this growth mindset. This will be something that you can carry with you the rest of your life. And there's value in every season of your life when you do that, when you apply it. But as soon as you become unteachable and don't want to learn, that's when you can become static, stagnant, in a fixed position, and whatever the cycle that's in place in your life at that time, it's just going to continue.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to change the cycles and the patterns in your life if you choose to not be teachable.
Yeah. And I think what's important to talk about next is failure, because when you do humble yourself, you learn new things. You take on being teachable and you apply that to your life. You're learning new things. Now you go to apply those things. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And how do we learn from our mistakes to continue to be in that growth mindset? Or how do we learn just from, maybe it's not a mistake, but just something happens to you, something you step out of your comfort zone. We've talked about doing that in previous episodes, and you do fail. When you fail, how do you continue to have that growth mindset rather than to retreat back to your fixed mindset, your fixed ways of remaining comfortable?
Right.
That makes sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. And you've kind of answered the question in the question itself, because the ability to move forward from a mistake, or the desire to stay where you're at or to retreat, is all based upon your mindset in the moment.
Mm-hmm. And
so a person with a growth mindset understands that there's no perfect execution of every plan and every performance, and there's going to be failures in life. Mm-hmm. And so your approach to the failure when it happens is one of, what can I learn? You're teachable. What can I learn from this so that I can leverage the mistake or leverage that failure, whether it was a mistake or not, and then grow from it and become better in the future, and either avoid that failure again or learn from that failure in a way to where it expands your knowledge base moving forward. I look at my concrete experience as a really clear example of that. It was so painful to have a concrete job go south when you're doing custom flat work or custom retaining walls. And once you pour concrete, there's no second chance. It's not like wood framing or steel or something to where you can go in and just kind of repair a certain point of your job. If you mess up a concrete job, you're typically on a custom job. You have to pull everything out and redo it. And it's so painful. And what happens is like you try a new finish. Let's say you've never done an acid etch finish before, and you go and you're like, you sell an acid etch job, which you can charge more for those jobs because they turn out beautiful. But I remember pouring a set of acid etch stairs with this beautiful pewter colored concrete. And you have vision for it, you get it all set up, and then you go and pour and finish it, and it didn't turn out. And it doesn't turn out. The homeowner may or may not know it didn't turn out, but you know that that's not the quality of work you want. And it was like, this isn't a thumbs down on this job. And you're sick, because that means that, this was a job. The one job that I'm thinking of specifically was up in the West Hills at the end of a dead end without a cul-de-sac. And the house was up above the street, no access to the backyard. And so we had to pull we had to jackhammer everything out and take it out. There's no access for equipment. It's all done by hand. And so you're sick in the failure. And when you're done with that, your first thought is, I'm never doing that again. That was too hard.
Yeah.
But then it's like,
I'm not going to take that job.
Right. I'm never doing an acid etch finish again. And it's just difficult. But that would be more of a fixed mindset, saying I can't learn, I can't grow, and I don't want to take the risk. But the growth mindset says, well, I kind of figured out a bunch of stuff how not to do it on this job. I could probably do way better on the next job and make it go from like a C- D+ job, which they ended up with an A job, of course. But on your next project, it's like, I could probably bring this up to an A job without too much pain because of what I've learned.
Yeah.
And so you step into the mindset of this failure is temporary.
Mhm.
It doesn't identify me. We're going to make it right and be fully responsible in taking care of this. But then moving forward, I'm going to grow from this, and I'm actually going to take on another one, and I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to get better and better until you're the best guy in town, and you're being able to charge what you want because people want your quality.
Yeah.
But that would never have happened if you hadn't leveraged that mistake and grown from it. And so it's that same way in our leadership, in our family, in the dynamic of how we confront failure is so important. Having that growth mindset that says, yeah, I failed. I feel bad in the moment, and it's always a gut punch. But we got another one of our points would be staying humble. Failure will humble you.
Oh yeah.
But failure is your friend.
Yeah.
And you've got to look at failure that way if you have a growth mindset. You're going to fail at some point, and you've got to not run from it, but you've got to embrace it as your friend, be responsible, take care of it, and then leverage that moving forward to where you can grow from it and become even better.
Yeah. Yeah, in the fire service, you have to be really comfortable with failure. We love failure on the training ground. That's where, when we are expected to perform on the fire ground, we need to understand our limits on the training ground. So, as a firefighter, the best firefighters that I've gotten to work with, they fail a lot on the training ground. And that failure produces success on the fire ground where we can't make mistakes.
Right.
If we make mistakes in training, it's a learning experience. If we make mistakes on the fire ground, it's death or property destruction. We're basically doing the opposite of what we've sworn to do. So the best firemen fail the most. I get to witness just the learning that takes place, and seeing that in my career makes it easier to apply it to different areas of my life. And like starting a business, you're gonna hit some setbacks and fail there. Marriage, you're gonna fail in marriage sometimes. Raising a family, and so just getting comfortable. And I'm really blessed to be in the fire service and to be able to witness just what failure can produce when we're needed to perform. And it's cool to see. So
Yeah.
I like how you're saying failure is our friend, get comfortable with it because it leads to opportunities to learn. And I think failure is the best teacher.
Absolutely. It's a great teacher.
It is the best teacher. And yeah, I know when I fail, that is the quickest way to learn as a man.
And there's always opportunities for you to learn more, but as you step into that opportunity, there's always kind of this underlying sense of risk of I could fail at this again.
Yeah, and there's a fear of failure too. And there's like in the fire service, when you first start out, it's scary to fail because you're around all of your peers and you think there's a lie that takes place where they're going to think less of me if I fail. But you need to fail to learn. You need to understand your limits. You need to understand what you need to put more time into. And so the lie is to fear failure.
Mm.
A lot of us as men fear that failure, and because of that, we don't step out. We don't step up to learn new things. We don't step up to maybe, like I'm applying it to my work, maybe there's a new, better way to doing things that's a lot easier, that provides a better service, and we don't step out to do it because we don't want to fail. Or maybe you don't step up to start that business that you've always wanted to because you're afraid of that failure.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you don't want to marry your girlfriend because you witnessed failure from your parents and you don't want to relive that. So there's this really unhealthy relationship between failure and man that needs to be broken. It's a lie that that we should never fail as men. No, we should push our limits. We should set out to learn from our failures, right?
Absolutely.
And that's what leads to growth.
That's right. You'll never grow unless you're willing to take on the risk of failure. And so you're trying to capitalize on the pain of the failure for your current growth and who you're becoming, that process of becoming. You know, like even now, and I feel like it's important that we never get out of that stage. And so as an older guy, you know, in my mid-50s, stepping into a whole new realm of podcasting and doing what we're doing, it's been very much a steep learning curve, and it would have been really easy for me just to stick with what I knew well and what I did really well and what I enjoyed doing and felt comfortable in. But I knew I knew that my assignment was shifting, and that in order for me to fulfill the assignment I got on my life, that I had a clear understanding of, that I needed to step into something that was new and there was a risk of failure in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can be in your mid-20s stepping into a family, or you can be in your mid-50s stepping into a whole new type of work. But that's a great place to be, is that growth mindset. Because what it does is it really lifts the ceiling of your opportunities, puts them much higher. It gives you so much more opportunity. And so fear of failure is definitely one thing that would keep guys in a fixed mindset, stepping into marriage, stepping into fatherhood, stepping into business, and understanding that, you know, great men throughout history, if you look, there's a tremendous book called David and Goliath, and it's basically about, I think it's called, the tagline is something like misfits, underdogs, and the art of taking down giants. And the basic premise of the book is that the very challenges that we face in life, the difficulties, challenges, and the failures that we face in life, help us become the people that we need to be to do great things. And you will not be able to accomplish great things in your life and be a great man in your life with a fixed mindset. If you feel like that you've got a level of natural ability, natural skill, and you've got a certain instinct that's super sharp, and you've got a wisdom that's beyond your years, great. But that's only going to carry you so far. It's like the kid who's just a tremendous athlete, incredible, natural, gifted athlete, who's going through the ranks in elementary school, junior high, and even into high school. And then you hit the college ranks and you realize that if you haven't put any work in, you're not even going to hit D1 sports, let alone succeed and be able to play D1 sports. And you can only rest on those natural attributes for so long. And as men, we feel like we can just kind of, there's a desire, we tend to go down the path of least resistance. And so it's like we kind of take on these roles and responsibilities in life thinking, I'll just kind of cruise through it and I'll end up being okay. I'll just take a girlfriend and try and lead that relationship, not lead that relationship, but just try and cruise through that relationship and just do what I do and not try and grow as a man and a leader and as a boyfriend, and think that relationship's going to turn out successfully. You don't have what it takes at that level unless you're growing. And even when you're growing, you don't have what it takes, but you're getting what it takes. And you're building upon one success after another. You're building off of one failure after another. And these building blocks that you're putting in place in your life, because you're desiring to grow, they're building up into you becoming the man that you were meant to be. And that's a lifelong pursuit. And I love that, because there's always, the beautiful thing about that is there's always hope for a guy to start growing. It doesn't matter where you're at right now. There's hope for you to start growing. And it takes a big change in the mindset.
Yeah, that's good. And it's like you said, how do guys, like, what's the point if you're never going to get there? You know, like a young guy, I don't want to say like me, but someone who's wants to step out, they haven't stepped out yet. They want to have this growth mindset. But the way that we're talking about it, it's like we're always going to be chasing that growth, you know, we're never going to arrive. So what's your advice to those guys that are kind of timid, kind of trying to play? Like, what's the point of this?
Right.
Like, what does this life lead to? What does the growth mindset lead to versus the fixed mindset? Because the fixed mindset sounds a lot easier, right? So why should we have this growth mindset? What does it lead to? What's the outcome, like, for eternity?
Mm-hmm. So if I'm hearing you right, the question is why would I pursue growth if I'll never become who I need to be, if it's a lifelong pursuit?
Yeah.
Why would I put the time and effort and work into pursuing something that I may never even attain? And I feel like a lot of men have been so disappointed by life that they feel that way, and they give up, and they surrender to mediocrity. They settle for status quo, and they honestly don't believe that they will ever be able to grow into the man that they want to become or wanted to become. And so they settle. You know, it's like we lose the boyish, romantic idea of being someone great because we realize that we don't have what it takes. So why would we pursue growth at that point if it's kind of a hopeless endeavor? And the reality is that the fixed mindset is one that is really focused on the now. Where am I at now, in the moment? And it can be also something that's based upon the now, that is satisfied with just trying to arrive at a point and being happy with the fact that you arrived. It's like I made a goal that I would do something, and so my whole focus and my whole effort in what I'm doing is about achieving that goal and arriving at that point and checking that off the box. And it's a very short-sighted mindset. And the problem is if you don't reach that goal and you don't arrive, you don't have any recourse, because that's what we just talked about as failure.
Yeah.
You haven't reached your goal. And so because of that, you're like, well, then I'll never be able to reach this other goal. And how am I going to reach that goal? And it's too overwhelming. And you're like, I can never do that. And so you just step back into the shadows and you're just like, I'm going to settle for status quo. And that might sound strong, but many, many, many men live at that level where they've just given up. The reality is, though, is that there's this something beautiful about the pursuit of growth, the becoming process. There's so much value and so much fulfillment and so much joy in the process that someone with a growth mindset goes past wanting to check a box and actually just achieve one thing, but it becomes more focused and aimed at who am I becoming as a whole being throughout the course of my life.
That's good.
And so the journey itself is never about the destination per se, but it's about the journey, the pursuit. And there's so much satisfaction in looking back on my marriage now, which we are celebrating 32 years in August.
Congrats.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But it's a beautiful thing because we know we're not where we want to be yet, but we know we're way beyond where we were. And where we're at right now is pretty amazing. Not easy. It's not like some kind of Hallmark card, but it's incredible when you actually go through the process of developing something, of growing into someone with someone else, and that love matures and you give it the time it needs to actually develop, and you become a married couple that loves each other so much deeper, so much better than you ever did when you were married for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. You see this love. So the process in and of itself is one in which it's so fulfilling and brings so much satisfaction. As a father, to see my adult kids, I wasn't just trying to get them to college and then checking them off the box. And it was like, okay, good. We accomplished that task. No, I'm becoming a father still, a father to adult kids. It's different. My fatherhood is different now than it was. And if I just checked off the box when they left the house, then I would not continue to becoming a great father. Because in order for me to be a great grandfather, I have to be a great father. And I want to be a great grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but the fulfillment, though, of seeing all those years of raising my 3 kids and then seeing them leave the house and the pain and the grief of that, and now watching them navigate life as adults and being involved at certain levels with them and loving them and rooting them on and being on my knees in the background with my wife, just praying and standing in the gap for them. You don't get that type of fulfillment until you get there.
Yeah.
You won't know what it's like until you go through the process. And so I would speak that into the guys that are like, it's not worth it. Man, it is so worth the effort to take on the burden of growth and becoming the person that you are to be in the assignment that God has for you. And so my assignment as a husband, as a father, as a leader, the journey and the pursuit of that has been absolutely phenomenal. And I would say that that's the fulfillment is in the process and in the journey.
Yeah.
And so don't allow the fact that you feel like you're never going to develop to that. If you feel like you're never going to attain that point, then that's failure. Well, no, that's not success. Because the truth is, and I just want to, the truth is that we will always be developing, in my humble opinion.
Mm-hmm.
We will always be growing. Even after we pass from this life into the next life and we get joined with Christ in heaven and we're in the presence of God and we're in the new heaven and the new earth someday, we're not going to have attained a point of static position. And this might be theologically, I can back this up, I think, theologically, but I feel like that we're always going to be pursuing growth because we will never be God. And God is so good. And there's so much of him that we will always have more to become and more to grow into. And that we will just continue to get more and more and more developed.
Yeah. And before we started filming, you talked about Adam in the garden.
Yeah.
And how the garden was perfect. And yet there was still like this potential for Adam. Like he was still in process. Can you go into that a little bit more?
Yeah.
Of what you were talking about?
Yeah, that's great. I love that line of thinking, in that sometimes before the fall, Adam was perfect. He was made by God, formed and fashioned by God, placed in the garden. And we see him as he's perfect. There's no sin in the picture. And it's him and God and this beautiful connection and relationship and walking in the garden and talking with God. And yet God is giving him responsibilities. God's saying, hey, I want you to name the animals, right? I want you to multiply and have dominion on the earth. There's this untouched potential that we see in Adam where he was perfect, but yet he was still becoming. And what God was giving him to do and who God was calling him to be was beyond where he was at in that moment. And so that whole process was one of God calling him into becoming. And throughout Scripture, we never see a point in time where God is satisfied with where we're at and says, "Oh, you're fine. Why don't you just stay right where you're at?" No, there's always more. And it's not a pressure thing or a performance thing, and I have to strive for more. No, it's just there's more to become.
Yeah, there's like a calling.
Yeah,
to step into deeper waters.
Yeah, I mean, what would it look for guys if they had the hope and the belief that they could be an incredible husband that shaped and formed a legacy for generations and broke the generational ways of doing things in their family so that they could walk in freedom and wholeness moving forward? What would it do to a guy who'd only seen the opposite of that if he really believed and had hope that he could become that man?
Yeah, that's good. I think, what you said was hope. And I think in our culture, Western civilization, we see just a lack of hope. That's just a plague over our country with suicide and depression and not having a purpose, not living on assignment, going through the day with apathy and no purpose. So I think this growth mindset and like having hope that we're being called to more, called to be more than what we currently are, and having the perspective to look back on where we've become and also look forward to who we're becoming. It's like there's a lot of peace in that.
Absolutely. And this hope, what we're talking about is not a pull yourself up by the bootstraps and you become the man that you need to become. There's this hope is in the fact that the reason why most men out there don't believe that they can become the men they were created to be is because they are actually in shackles and enslaved. If you're struggling with pornography or sexual addiction or any type of addiction, you are shackled, and a person who is shackled is not able to run free and is not able to be free in order to grow. Your ceiling is your shackle. Your ability to grow is your shackles. And so you may be, I knew a guy who was an incredible, naturally talented pianist. He could play the piano like classical, incredible. He was a naturally gifted musician just in general. And he had like genius levels of IQ. And so you see all this potential, right, in this guy's life that God made him with. But he was addicted. He'd struggled with addiction his whole life. And his addiction, his shackles became his ceiling, and he was never able to grow beyond his ceiling. And that causes a man to lose hope. That causes a society to lose hope. And when we understand that our hope is not in Will or John being able to become and do this on our own, it helps with that belief and that hope that we can do anything because we've experienced the miraculous in our lives. And that is the release of those shackles and the stepping into freedom, the healing of the wounds and the injuries of the past, and being able to be whole and complete moving forward because of God's grace and God's love in our lives and the work of Jesus. We can walk with that type of hope. And so the listeners that are out there right now, if you're like feeling, I don't have hope that I'll ever be the man that I want to be, your hope is not in yourself. Your hope is not in a mindset. Your hope is in Jesus. And Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And he will give you access to the Father, and the Father will bring you in, and he will adopt you as a son, and he will clean you up, heal you, free you, take those shackles off. And at that point, that level of hope, he's going to breathe life into you and say, hey, become the man that I made you to be. And that there's this thing called resurrection power, the same, the Spirit of God, when the Holy Spirit came and brought Jesus back, when Jesus resurrected, that same spirit of resurrection that was available for Jesus is available for you, me, and every listener out there.
Yeah.
To where we can be resurrected from the death, from the slavery, and we can have that hope. And it's in that place of hope that we get the belief that, okay, God, if you did it for John and Will, you can do it for me. I've seen your power at work in my life, and I know that from that point I can grow because you're helping me grow. And so the growth mindset is one that comes from a place of experiencing true change that you had nothing to do with. When you experience true change that you have nothing to do with, where you're forgiven, you're healed, and you're freed, then it brings you the courage to say, okay, I can grow. It gives you the point at which you can look back on and be like, okay, you did it then, you can do it now. Right? And so, yeah, there is a point in which someone who doesn't know God can have a growth mindset and who can grow and grow and grow, but they will always be limited to the amount that they can grow to by the shackles that they carry, that bind them. That will be their ceiling.
That's good. That's right. Wow.
Yeah. But I feel like it's important, though, for guys to really understand that the growth mindset has to be developed. It's like if you're wanting to see growth, when you think of growth, you think of, like, you can use the analogy of a plant, right? Or a garden. If let's say you want to start a garden, you don't just go in your yard and just throw a bunch of seeds on the ground. There has actually got to be a development of the soil to create an environment where that growth or that fruit can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like that we touched on a couple points about being teachable, about not being afraid of failure, being humble. Those are things that guys can apply to their lives to where they can actually grow because they're creating an environment in which the growth can happen.
Yeah.
And so for guys who are in a position where it's like, man, they've either taken on a new career, or you've stepped into a new marriage or a new relationship, or you're a new dad, whatever, when you're stepping into something new, it can be very intimidating, and there can be a lot of new challenges associated with that. And I think it's important that don't be afraid of feeling inadequate or like you're not enough in the moment, because we're not. We're like we said, there's going to be failures, and in that point in time, we're not enough. But really developing an environment in your life to where you're walking, where it's like, okay, I'm in a new job. Okay, I'm going to be teachable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to watch how other people do it. I want to learn. I'm not going to assume that I'm coming in here knowing everything. I'm going to be humble. I'm not going to try and present myself as being somebody I'm not. I'm going to be open to feedback when people have feedback for me, and I'm not going to point fingers and blame others. So, this whole creating this environment can help you as you take on new levels of responsibility in relationships, work, leadership, whatever it is. And so the teachable part, the humility part, not fearing failure, those are all really good ways to start creating that environment. And you can apply those in every area of your life.
Yeah. I think also you mentioned being patient, and like, can you force growth, or does growth just happen? Like, can you force something to grow? Like, we've been talking about giving things nutrients, but you can't really force the growth. Like, you can assist it by applying these things to your life, but there's also a process that you're talking about, just that you do have to be patient. You're not going to force anything to happen, right?
Yes, there's points in time where you can accelerate growth.
Mm-hmm.
Fertilizer works really well,
Mm-hmm.
or different applications of, different applications that you can apply to a garden to make it grow more quickly or whatever. So yeah, you can, like, if if you're a single guy and you have very little responsibility on your plate and you want to really grow in a certain area, you can really expedite that growth and just apply so much effort in that area to where you can really accelerate your growth in that area because you've got the time and the energy and the money to do that at that point.
Mm-hmm.
The long-term growth and the growth is always a process, though.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that it's hard for us oftentimes, is anything that takes a long time. And so back to the achieving thing and the accomplishing, and you're putting you're setting these goals with the idea that, I'm going to be focused on the achievement rather than the process. That's one of those things where you have to be patient in the process, and you have to give others patience in their process as well.
Yeah.
But as long as we're applying ourselves to growth, that means that we're creating an environment where we can grow well, where growth can happen. And we're also managing our expectation of how quickly that growth is going to happen and how quickly we advance in our forward motion. I feel like sometimes we want to get the cart before the horse, and it's something to where we have to learn. You have to understand point A and point B before you get to point M and O.
Yeah.
And I feel like especially like in marriage and in business and those kind of areas, it's like there's foundational things that you need to learn and go through in order to be prepared for the more complex issues, for sure. And so being patient in the process is absolutely very important. And understanding that you put the work in, if the Bible talks about how, we can plant the seed and we can water the seed, we can prepare the soil, plant the seed and water the seed, but ultimately it's God who gives the growth.
Yeah. And
so this is not just an effort of you grinding it out to become the man you want to be, but it's this partnership with you and God's word, right? Shaping your thinking and renewing your mind. And then the Holy Spirit at work in you. That whole combination, that partnership between you, God's word, and the Holy Spirit, and the people in your life, those are the players involved in the process of growth.
Yeah.
And so being patient and allowing that growth to happen through those players is really important.
It's good. It's good. Man.
Do you have any other questions on that last point? I don't know that I explained it well enough for you. Was that clear?
I think that was clear. I don't know if I'll be able to articulate this well, so I might need your help here. But there's like a question. The young guy that's living on assignment, wants to live on assignment. He's new in either starting a business or new in his career, freshly married, wanting to have kids or has little kids, and just has a lot going on. There's a lot of things going on, a lot of distractions. You feel like we've talked about before, just trying to keep your head above water, staying afloat. Where can that guy shift his mindset, or how can that guy apply these things to his life, like in that moment, in the storm, where it feels like you're just trying to do, keep everyone happy, keep food on the table. You're involved. There's just so much going on. You're involved with church. You're involved with. I feel like a lot of guys, like at my age, might be in that position. and it might seem kind of challenging to have a growth mindset when there's so much going on. So I know you were there. You were a young guy starting a business. I don't know if you thought about these things, but if you could go back, what would you do to figure all this out? That's kind of a big question.
It's a great. It's. I love it though. I really do, because I would love to be able to go back and talk to my 28-year-old self.
Yeah,
and be able to be like,
and
hey,
just say like, dude, it's gonna be okay.
You're gonna be okay.
You're fine.
You can't.
Relax.
You can't. When you're in that place, you can't fail at a level to where you just blow everything up and it's irreparable.
Mm-hmm. Does it feel like that can happen though?
You feel that's kind of pressure you feel sometimes.
Yeah.
And in that pressure, you begin to get so focused on doing, because I have to work more to bring in more money. I have to. Everything's so much more work when you first start doing something too. It's like when you join the fire service, it's so much harder to put your gear on, and then to be moving your gear, and then to work in your gear. And it takes experience and time. And with time and experience, you begin to get more, it becomes more natural to where the things that were hard when you started, you don't even think about 5 years down the line.
Yeah.
And the guy who's in the middle of it, married, kids, new, young career, you can get so caught up in the pressure of keeping it all going, and you're just doing, and you're just checking things off the box, and you're not even, it can get to the point where you get absolutely burnt out, and then discouragement, and so I would go back and I would tell myself to relax a little bit.
Yeah.
Not relax in the sense of
stop doing
anything. Yeah. But removing just some of the pressure off my shoulders, and saying, hey, why don't you just be really intentional about being aware of what you're thinking and how you're thinking in the moment. Because it's a mindset piece, and so much of what we struggle with, that struggle happens in the mind.
Yeah.
And as a young guy, you can probably work 16, 18 hours a day if you had to, and just get after it and just go for a long time if you had to. And so it's not a physical thing typically. It's not a desire thing, because most guys aren't in that position wanting to fail. But the challenge is that there's this element where in the book of 1 Corinthians in the Bible, it talks about, in chapter 13, it talks about how when I was a boy, I thought as a boy, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. And part of this process as a young man stepping into new things is learning to put away childish things, which includes putting away childish thinking. And being able to take a more mature look at thinking and processing your thoughts, and being intentional in taking the time to look at, how am I thinking? What am I thinking? And what am I allowing those thoughts to speak to myself? Because so much happens under the cover of the activity that we can hide a lot of deficiencies in our thinking just because we're doing so much. But at some point it's going to break down because we're not thinking correctly.
Yeah.
And when we start to break down, then that leads us to, if we don't have the right way of thinking, the right mindset, that causes us to think, well, I'll never get past this. I'll never be good enough. I'll never be a good enough husband or a good enough father. Whatever it happens, you get to that point, and because you don't understand how to handle failure, because you've been so focused on just working that you've not invested anything into your growth. It's easy to take that hit completely to your own soul and be pushed back into that place of surrender where, like, no, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably going around the mountain the long way here, but the idea is that I would go back and be like, hey, pay attention to your thinking. How are you thinking? What are you thinking? And what are you telling yourself? And begin to apply these principles to your thinking. Why don't you find the guy that you want to become and go ask him,
Yeah.
hey, how did you do this when you were my age? That's called being teachable.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you go and step into a young marriage course or some type of a course that maybe you normally naturally wouldn't apply yourself to, and be like, hey, I'm just going to say I don't have it all figured out and I need to learn something. So there's a humbling and there's a stepping into something and being intentional. And so really taking that young guy and saying, slow down, because you can run, and be intentional and really give away the boyish thinking of, oh, I don't need to think about that. I don't need to worry about that. I don't need to worry about my soul, and begin to think like a man, put away the childish things and think like a man in a way to where it's like, okay, if the battle's in my mind, I need to take care of my mind.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what that's, at least in the moment, that's what I would tell myself.
No, that's good. Because also in the moment you feel alone, and it's easy to get so distracted that you say, I don't have time to find a mentor or to make a connection or go out for a cup of coffee with someone that I look up to. I don't have the time to do that. But it's so important to know that, like, when you and I first connected, like, you have this idea of someone before you meet them, and then you talk to them and you're like, oh no, I was facing these exact same things that you're facing right now. And it's like, even just having that connection, it just takes weight off. It's like, oh, so I'm not alone in this. Okay, well, what did you do when you were in this situation? And then that man starts speaking life into you, and that connection is huge. So I would say, if you do feel like you're going through something and you're alone and you are living this life on assignment, but you do feel like you're just keeping your head above water, find someone that you look up to, like what you've been talking about, make that connection and ask questions and bring, like, everything to light that you're feeling, because chances are that person was in the exact same shoes that you are.
Mm-hmm.
And will be able to help guide you and say, hey, if I was in your shoes right now, these are the things that I would have focused on. Because it is challenging being where we're at, or being in that situation, having young kids. It's like, that is such an important place to be at home too, because your kids aren't going to be that same age forever. Like, what I'm finding is, every few months is a new season with kids, and you're not going to get that last season back. So shifting your perspective is huge, and then making those connections, like having a mentor
That's right.
that you look up to. It's
Intentionality,
yeah.
being intentional about becoming, about growth.
Mm-hmm.
And
knowing that struggling is okay, or feeling like you're doing so much or trying to keep things together, but then you also speak, like, God's word into me, to where it's like, you're not alone. Like, you have the Father, the love of the Father, like, right there with you. That same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead lives inside of you. You're not alone going through this. So sometimes it takes someone to speak that into you to make you recognize, okay, I feel alone. I feel like I'm holding this all together, but really, I'm not.
it's really, really true. We are so blessed as followers of Christ and men of God, it's like we have this opportunity to step into assignments that God has for us and to become the men that He made us to be. But the weight of it's not all on our shoulders. And He's there to help us. And so many times we get caught up in all the doing that we can lose sight of the becoming, and we lose track of the growth mindset. And for the guys listening today, I just want to encourage each one of you to realize that when it comes to the final day in your life, you won't necessarily be sitting back thinking about all of the checklists that you checked, all the to-do lists that you checked every item off that to-do list, and you did all of these things. There will be a lot more weight on who you became in the process. Yeah, we want to do great things. But as we are doing great things, let's become great men.
Yeah.
And that's what we want to leave you guys with today. And if you're feeling like, man, there's just no way that I feel like just with this one podcast, I could actually grab hold of a growth mindset and really begin to step into the belief that I can grow and even know how to grow, well, reach out to us. Go to our website at www.mobilizedman.com, and you can contact us there. You can sign up for our weekly newsletter where we send out some encouragement each week, and we share about the podcast episode. And so there's a lot of insight that goes into those newsletters for you. But we would love to connect with you and hear your story and see how we could help you in the process of growing, because man, we want to see all men grow into the man that God made you to be. So that being said, it's been a good time. Will, great job today.
Thank you, John.
Yeah. And until next week, stay on the path.